And we've actually got so far with explanation of some of the sanctuary. And we started off with, Dion telling us the overall concept of the temple and God's plan, and explaining why it was there and the layout of it. And then we went into the tabernacle in motion, the actual tabernacle that was in the desert that they had to move with them. And then went into details of the furniture within the tabernacle, the brazen altar and the bronze laver, which Elder Alex explained could represent baptism. And so we walked through that. And then our last presentation last week was with Elder Dion, and she went through explaining, as she said, contemporizing the temple for us today. What does it mean for us today? And, the station, it actually was a sign of the covenant. It was a sign of the end of the exile for the Israelites and for us. It was a sign, it was a socio-political institution, because from there, laws were governed. It was a symbol of national sovereignty. These were nomads. God said, I took the least of you so that I could be elevated. He took a group of nomads and made them great so that his power could be seen to everyone around. And so they had a name. They had a nation at that point because God gave them that nationality. And tabernacle also represents secured blessings. They would get blessings for the entire people from that tabernacle. And it was also a source of worldwide blessing. We were, back then, the Christians were supposed to actually spread the news to everyone else of this wonderful, only living God to mostly idol-worshiping nations. And then it was a point of prayer. It was a point, a central point of the highest prayer that could ascend to God. So this temple represented a lot to God's people then, but it represents a lot to us now. The question I would ask is the sanctuary done with? Is that an Old Testament thing? When Jesus died on the cross and the veil was rent, was that a symbol that the sanctuary is no longer valid? Oh, yeah, you can answer. Yes. Okay, so right. So one sister says, yes, the sanctuary still exists because, as we learned earlier, that this physical, mobile temple, which later was built into a glorious fixed temple by King Solomon and a few others, was actually just a shadow, a representation of a heavenly sanctuary, which is going on, has been going on, and in fact, at the end of the day, we find out also that this sanctuary was a symbol of Jesus himself. The reality is, as we go through the temple, as we go through the sanctuary, we see Jesus in every single thing. The altar of sacrifice was the Lamb of God, Jesus. The laver, the water of life, Jesus himself said, I am life. I am, you can drink off me, okay? That I am actually the one that will give you the bread as well, which we're going into right now. So we're at the table of showbread, which is also called the bread of the presence. Okay? So, Jesus being the water and the life, he also said that he is the bread of life. And we understand now that everything so far with the temple is really Jesus. So, the showbread, the table of showbread, was actually placed in the northern side of the temple. And it was about 3 feet by a foot and a half wide by about 2 feet 3 inches high. And on the Sabbath day, the Levites made 12 loaves. And they would put them on the table of showbread, arranged in rows of piles, 6 in a row, with pure frankincense on each row. During the entire week, that bread would lay there, and it would be eaten at the end of that week by the priest. Now, interestingly enough, the command to all the people by God was that there should be no baking of bread on the Sabbath day, that everyone should prepare everything. It is not lawful to bake common bread upon the Sabbath. The command is very clear. This is that which the Lord had said. Tomorrow is the rest of the holy Sabbath unto the Lord. Bake that which you will bake today, and boil that you will boil, and that which remaineth over lay up for you to be kept until the morning. But the Lord said to the Levites, this bread you prepare on the Sabbath day. Now, if you can understand the deep representation of that, is that we're now seeing that Christ is this bread. This is a symbol of Christ himself, who claimed to be and is Lord of the Sabbath. You see, this showbread represented God's provision. It was something that was actually how he helped them through the desert, how he took them from Egypt, how he gave them manna during the desert that they weren't even very grateful for. And when they were tired of the manna, he rained down, birds from the sky that they could have meat. And they still weren't satisfied. But God is actually showing his provision in this showbread. It also represents an intimate relationship, an intimate fellowship that God wants to have with us. For in Revelation 3, verse 20, it actually says, behold, I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come into him and dine with him, and he with me. That's how close God actually says he wants to be with us. He uses food as one of the ways of representing actual friendship, closeness. So it also represented an offering to God. As we give our offerings to God, as we give of what we have, of what he's given us, that is our offering. This was a representation of that. In fact, the priests actually eating the bread show that Christ, this was special, and that Christ was now in us. So there is a lot of meanings towards that are attached to the showbread. So the priest served unto the example of the shadow of heavenly things. Therefore, there's a heavenly lesson for us in this antitype. It was a continual offering, but it also said that we were wholly dependent on God. So while the Levites prepared the showbread, they also had to eat of it. That was their sustenance. That was their food. So we had to be always cognizant of the fact that everything that we have, all the hard work we do, the smarts that we have that get us as far as we've gotten actually originated from God. So it all belongs to Him. And He sustains us and He continues to give to us. So God actually gives us also temporal food as well as actual food. Sorry?
Does it say what what the significance of the frankincense was?
That will actually, you'll actually get that covered in the next one. But what would you say, does anyone have an answer for that? No?
Like preservatives.
The baby Jesus, actually, yes, frankincense was one of the presents that was actually given to the baby Jesus. So, again, a gift to Jesus, an offering, as it were. So, Jesus says basically that except ye eat of my flesh. Now, here's the thing Jesus actually was trying to explain to his disciples how all these rituals that they're so used to, being Jews, how they were not an end in themselves, that they actually had a meaning far higher than just this physical ritual. And it was after he'd actually fed the 5,000, and it was a long, hard day. And they asked him, pretty much how he did that. And he actually had an answer for them. He said, this is in John 6, verse 35. In John 6, verse 35, it says, and Jesus said to them, I am the bread of life. He who comes to me shall never hunger, and he who believes in me shall never thirst. That is the bread, and that is the laver, the water. So he was explaining that he was not just the Messiah, that he was also to be accessed daily. He was sustaining life. He wasn't just going to set up a kingdom. In fact, after he left them and went up to heaven, he said, I'll leave the Holy Spirit with you. But you cannot do without me on a daily basis. I am the living bread from which you have to partake if you are to be spiritually alive. So we're here with the bread as life itself. But we also know that the bread is what? What's the other thing we know of the bread? The Word. The Word. But we come back full circle, don't we? Because we say in John 1 that Jesus is the Word. So we still come back to Jesus. But the Word, the bread that we have to feed on is the Word. That is Jesus. We have to feed on this Word at all times, every day, in order to have life. This is the area of sanctification. This is where we're going through this life, and we may be struggling. We have our highs and lows, but our walk requires us to actually tap into that source, that power source, that source of life on a daily basis, hourly basis, in order for us to make it through this life and this place, which is not our own, not anymore. So we actually, the priests actually were not only to set the hot bread upon the table on the Sabbath day, but later the same bread was to be eaten. God designed that his people should each Sabbath day gain a fresh experience in divine things. which would make them better fitted to meet the temptations of the week. The soul that never gains a deeper experience on the Sabbath than on any other day fails to keep the Sabbath as God would have them. Now, this is an interesting statement because we're actually seeing that the Sabbath played a significant role here in the tabernacle service. And it actually came into play here as the priests were supposed to be prepared on Sabbath. That means the Sabbath was quite special. The other people were not supposed to. And this indicates the Sabbath as a time when we actually come even closer to Jesus. Remember, God created it in Eden, and really what he wanted was for us to have a closer walk. He would talk about walking in the cool of the shade and talking. Adam saw God face to face, talked with God, you see. And then there was this special day, this date, as it were, with us, with Adam, where it was just me and you, God. It's just us. We leave off the distractions of the world, or we leave off all the other things. It's not a sin towards sports, but would you bring your TV to the table at the restaurant with your date? No. So some questions don't even need to get asked as to what you can't do. It is what gets in the way of that special time between you and your God. And he's waiting because he set the time. And he says, this is where I want you to be. If you come any other day, you can call me on the phone, but you won't get that special time face to face with me. So this is it, Sabbath. I've created it for you. Okay? And then Jesus came and he expanded on that I am Lord of the Sabbath. And it says, again, reminded them that instead of making the over 300 laws about the Sabbath, making it a burden, let's rest. So here we have Sabbath tied in to the bread, the showbread, and all the various things that are applied symbolically to Jesus, his intercession for us in heaven at this point as high priest. Again, we find that the priest who is supposed to eat of the showbread partake of Jesus Christ. That's special significance. And also prepare that time with Jesus on Sabbath. We also find that we are called to be what? The priesthood, a royal priesthood, right? Right. A peculiar people, your chosen generation, a holy nation, his own special people, that you may proclaim the praises of him who called you out of darkness into his marvelous light. 1 Peter 2:9. Again, we don't have priests today within the Christian, Judeo-Christian system after Christ was here, after the whole tabernacle sanctuary system was abolished. But what we have become are priests of our own, which means we have this obligation. We have this obligation of interceding for people. We have this obligation of pointing people to Christ, of telling them about Christ and what he's done for them, of telling them where they will be going if they follow Christ, of pointing to the chief priest, Jesus Christ, who is interceding for us now. So as we close off on this area, I'd just like you to remember that this sanctuary message is, in many cases, not fully understood, not fully followed. We may grow up in an Adventist home from we were children, yet we sometimes relegate this to the people who actually, are learned in it, and we say, okay, you tell us, and we'll listen, and that's it. But if we actually study this for ourselves, if we understand how it applies today in real life, rather than just the symbolisms, we actually will have a different mindset as to how we approach life, as to how we approach people, as to how we look at people from the perspective of potential, not what they're doing now, what they could be doing if you knew Christ, what you could be doing if you knew yourself and what Christ wanted for you. So that changes our perspective with our obligation to actually intercede for people, to actually point them to Christ, and to be the representation of Christ that he wants us to be. That ends this area of the Showbread. Next week we'll be studying the altar of incense and its service, and we'll get a deeper look into the sanctuary and its process. Thank you very much. Let us now go into our prayer time. We're closing prayer. Now, this is what I want to ask. I mean, this probably hasn't been done before, but I know not everybody is actually fully up to speed on a lot of these things. You do have questions. You may have questions that you would like to get answered regarding the sanctuary. There is a source where you can actually put your questions in. If you actually go to psdatv and go to any one of these series that they have archived, you can also send in your comments and questions. And we have other sources as well. I think later I can get Lyndon here to tell you all the other avenues you have for actually accessing this forum and getting questions answered. Again, we also have a deeper dive that happens with the pastors, where the podcasts, where you can ask a lot of questions, and if it comes to this sanctuary message, we'd like to brief them so that they're prepared to answer those questions for you. But tap into that podcast, and it's online as well, and you can get some of your questions answered. Pastor Joe would be able to tell you even more about that. Okay. Let us move to so let us have if there are any online viewers that requested any prayers, would like to ask Lyndon to see if he has any requests for that as we move into closing prayers and the prayer circle. Could you check for me? Yeah. And Mike Curzone says he could not be here to actually blow his shofar, which everybody's used to. Okay, so we will now go into our prayer circle as we close off today's service.
Hi there. I want to thank you for joining us for our worship service today. I hope that you enjoyed it and that you are blessed. If you are looking for more uplifting content, I'd like to invite you to join us at Plantation sdatv for more uplifting content. If you're in need of prayer, please join us at plantationsda.org and let us know how we can pray for you. And if you ever happen to be in the Plantation, Florida area, please don't hesitate to stop by and see us. I'll see you soon. God bless.